Good morning. I thought I'd be really, really real with you guys. Like really real. You know what I mean? Like where I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I just smoked so much weed. So I don't know if you're gonna hear it or not. But we moved. Well, of course now it's quiet. But oh, don't worry. Don't worry. It doesn't last very long. But the reason why I'm so high is there's no way we can live here. Like there's oh, that was awesome. I love when I do like these faux curls. Ooh, beautiful. There's literally like no way I could stay here. When we were offered the spot, we literally took it because we had no other option. And you could put lipstick on a pig all day long and it could be fucking cute, but it's still a pig. So I'm like, this is my bed right now. Um, where do I begin? Where do I begin? Where do I begin? So last year when we moved, a lot of you know it was the same thing. You know, we were in a rent to own and it just was not working out with our landlord. And it was, you know, those of you who've been with me for a long time, you know, like it was rough. It was rough. But it's okay because we've learned so much and we had to learn lessons. Can you hear it? We had to learn lessons. You know what sucks is my curls look so pretty, but you know when you're like, I gotta brush my hair, you know? We moved yesterday and anyway, I don't know if I'm gonna air this or not, but I just wanted to talk to you guys about life and what's happening right now and the changes and that you're not alone and not to feel fear because we're all exactly where we're supposed to be. I know that sucks. I know that sucks. I mean, I've got tape on here to keep, I had to put like peppermint and eucalyptus and, you know, on like little toilet paper balls up there. And then I had to seal it because the ants came back in. Can you hear the traffic? The ants came back in and it'd been a minute. I was actually really grateful. I thought I had fully gotten rid of them, but I think just for the winter. And then once I put stuff in there again, it got better. So I sealed it up and there's other ways they can get out. I'm not torturing them, but this is like their little mainstay where they started and where I was like battling them last year because we were literally like right next to an anthill. And this really works, by the way. If you feed an anthill, if you have an anthill close to your house, instead of trying to fight the ants, feed the ants. Feed them. I know it sounds crazy, right? Because people are like, oh, they'll come back. I'm like, they're not fucking raccoons. They stay in their little, like, whatever. If you keep bringing food to them, they fucking love you. They don't have to go and trek into your house and get the food and bring it back. They will respect you. It's a respect thing with nature. Oh, this little mosquito's been like hanging out here. It's like since it was like a little baby mosquito, we've been like talking. It must be a male because I'm like, they haven't tried to feed off me, or maybe baby mosquitoes don't drink blood yet. I don't know, but anyway, it's been an interesting experience, which I have to look up mosquito spirit medicine. So with all that being said, I had to get really high because when we came to look at this property, I was like, nope, no way. I'm like, it's on the freeway. And he's like, you get used to it. I'm like, I will never get used to that. And he's like, trust me. He's like, I've been here for years. And he's got properties all over the place. So it's an interesting property. It's a really big property, but it's on the freeway. So it's like, he's like on, I don't know how, another acre or so away, at least on the other side of the house. He stays in like his little thing. So I think some people just don't get how sensitive of an empath I am. And they're like, oh, you'll just get used to it. Oh, you'll just get used to it. My whole fucking life has been that. Why are you so sensitive? Why does the temperature have to be a perfect temperature for you, you know? And then I remember my sister saying to me one time, you know, we've been talking about it. I'm like, I'm like, who's we? I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, who's we? And she's like, we think you're autistic. And I'm like, you think I'm autistic? And she's like, yeah. She's like, you know, everybody always thought you were weird or the black sheep. She's like, it was almost like it just made them all feel more comfortable if there was a label on it. And I was like the opposite, where I'm like, stop fucking trying to label me. I'm a telepathic fucking medium. Just because that frightens you, and just because that is, you know, whatever. Yeah, can you hear that? I mean, my fucking nerves are shot. I've been packing, I've been moving, you know. So, you know, it's like, we can't lie to ourselves. So I believe that this is some type of experiment and like last thing with like Alder and I, because we were doing really well staying like friends and like cool with each other through the move until things went awry. And they went so awry and they went so south so fast that like we both just fucking snapped. It was like being kind and gentle with each other moved to like fuck you moment, where I literally, like, he said something so mean to me. He's never said anything that mean to me. Like never. Like never. And the interesting thing was, the only thing that or I should say, what I realized, what happened, I'm realizing it in the moment, is that he has a really hard time with rejection or someone telling him, you know, he talk about labels. Sorry. I'm like, I feel better when it's up. But I just had to brush it out. You know, sometimes you're like, you just got to brush it out. I just had to brush it out. It'll come back. Those curls. I did that just overnight. I'm like, I'm more in this mode that I'm like, I couldn't do a glamour pretty if I tried. Like, look at me. I'm like, I haven't slept. I can barely keep my eyes open. Plus I'm really high. But yeah, he, you know, we all have our stuff. I'm like, why am I trying to adjust my, I'm like, I can just sit here. I'm like, why am I trying to adjust that when I can just come here? Oh, you know what? I have lighting now. Or I should say, like, I don't know what my lighting's like over here. Hi, I'm back. Oh, that's better. You know, it's a new place, so you gotta adjust to like everything. It's like the weird thing about living in your house that moves is like that everything in around you is similar. It's whatever, but then it's like the outer that it's like, I mean, yesterday morning, or the last like several months, I've been in this like peaceful, beautiful, like whatever. And now I feel like I am in fucking hell. Like I literally feel like I'm in hell. I never say things like that, but I mean, I felt it last night, and then it got peaceful. When it's peaceful here, it's heavenly. It's heavenly. But when it's, I mean, we're on the freeway, but like we have a view of a bay and salt water and like mountains on the other side. It's like, you know what it is? It's like staying at like Motel 6 and you're like, oh, it's so beautiful. And you're like, I could live here. But then the traffic's going by and you're like, oh, wow, it's really loud here. And you can't really sleep because it's on the highway, on the freeway. That's what this is. I'm at Motel 6. And I'm glad we're doing a trade, because our trade is to, you know, keep up the property. And that's what we did for the other one. So, I mean, I wouldn't give a dime for this place, no matter how fucking pretty it is. But we'll get to that in a minute. So what I realized was that Alder and I play out these patterns of our childhood, of our adulthood. And I have been, when I'm alone, I'm not doing that because I'm here. If I catch myself in a negative pattern, I stop. and I catch myself, and then I stop, and then I catch myself, and I get better, and I get better, and I get better. But what I realized is that when he and I are together, we're both really sensitive. We're basically the same person, but we're not. Because I'm a triple Sag with my moon in Scorpio, and he's a triple Gemini with his moon in Sag. But we have a lot of similarities, and then we're the polar opposites of each other. He was born on a Sunday. I was born on a, moon day, which blessed moon day, blessed March 3rd. It's the 3-3 portal, 2024. You know what? I was wondering if I should get some more light in here. Hold on. I'm like, hold on. I'm like, let me see what I can do. I'm like, let's see what we got. Maybe that's better. I do think that keeping the, oh, that was the other thing too. As you hear the semis going by, the semis travel at night. So that's what I was saying when I was like, I kind of want to put this down. I don't know what you guys can see back there. Oh, you can't really see back there. Let me see. Sorry. My big face in there. Is that better? Worse? I don't know. I'm like, does it really matter? Does it really matter? There's no filters, or I don't have time for that shit. I need water. And I know some people, I drive some people crazy, and some people, like, it doesn't bother them that I'm so, but the truth is, I'm not normally this ungrounded and this untethered. And I woke up this morning, I didn't sleep well. The traffic didn't die down. I was like, it's a Sunday night. What the fuck? And I literally was like, what the fuck? It was just this moment where you're like, what the fuck? Like, what did we get ourselves into? Why did we do this? However, when we got here last night, I took a video. I don't know when I'll post it. But when we got here last night, he had a fire going. He's like, I'm just burning up some wood. And I was like, okay, cool. So that was awesome. And then after our landlord and Alder both left, Alder was going to stay the night here, but now I'm so fucking glad. His instincts were like, no, because he had a job today and we were supposed to move on Saturday. It was a rough fucking weekend. That's why I didn't, post a lot on the Magical Medium. And I posted a lot on Lula's Labyrinth, but it's only because they were already done. It was like, my mind wasn't on spirit work, you know what I mean? Even like picking a shorts or anything, I'm like, I can't. I'm not there. And the only reason why I did the ones on Lula's Labyrinth is because spirit told me like which ones, and I remembered. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that video, and I knew where it was, and I was like, cool. But anyway, yes, like this is hard. This is really difficult. Like this is like one of the hardest things I think I've been through in a really long time, and I almost feel like it's like some form of like my finals, if that makes any sense. Do you know what I mean? I feel like Alder and I are in our finals. This is like the sink or swim time. This is like the no bullshit. Because when we're in good moments, it's like we're like peas and carrots again, and it's just like a natural. It's like the day that Bubba died, when we went up to the mountains, and it was like it was like us, and it felt like us, super grounded, super connected, really relaxed. It was so wonderful. But over the weekend, it was like, we had all these plans with everybody and all the way things were going to go. And it was just, let's put it this way. I know everything happens for a reason. I do. I like believe that wholeheartedly. But I also I feel like when we tether ourselves to people who are very heavy-footed in the third dimensional reality, it's almost impossible to have some type of like true connection because I love my landlord. I really do. I adore him. He's a very giving, generous, awesome person, like through and through. Give the shirt off his back kind of guy. would stop on the side of the road and help you kind of guy. Just a really good guy. However, he said something yesterday where I was like, oh, it's interesting because all of our landlords have always been older and elderly, or like in the elderly or getting to the top of like the crone energy. A lot of women, but my last 2 landlords were men. And one was really controlling and older and military and like didn't even realize like how incredibly narcissistic they were. Like it was just it was a tough experience, but I learned so much. I've grown so much. But yesterday my landlord said something to me where I was like, brother, oh, he's younger. He's the first landlord we've ever had, both of us, that is younger. Not by much, just like a few years. Like we'd be like seniors and he'd be a freshman. You know what I mean? Like that kind of like, but also when you're a freshman, you're kind of green, right? But when you're a senior, you've gone through those like bad freshman, years and sophomore, and by junior you're starting to get your stride, and you're like, fucking, I'm a badass, by the time you become a senior, you're like, ah, fuck this, I can't wait to get out of here and go into the real world, right? The real world. So this experience has been something else. So I will put in the community section pictures of this place so you can see how magical it is and see like, I mean, last night when like the fire was like, the sun was setting over the mountains and the fire was there, oh my gosh, it was magic. It was fucking magic. But then all of a sudden it's like a big truck goes by and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, no fucking way, dude. No fucking way. So this morning when I woke up, I had this moment where I had to start laughing and I'm like, dude, there is where we are on the freeway is there's a few places, but within walking distance that I can like buy food or, clothes or something like that. But, cause it's kind of a touristy area. But the one thing that like really got me excited was I was like, oh dude, I'm like, look, I'm like, I'm like, cause I'm one of those people, especially if the weather's nice, I can walk like miles. I can walk miles. If I have somewhere safe and the weather is nice and I've got good shoes. When I lived in Chicago, I did it, but mostly when I lived in Portland, Oregon, oh my gosh, I lived in the Southeast neighborhood. And I remember one time I wanted to go downtown. There was this area that I really wanted to check out. And I remember I walked. I took the bus home because I was like, dude, when I mapped it out, I realized that I had walked 8.8 miles, which is really cool and awesome. But like, I was like, oh man, I was in my 40s. I can handle a lot better back then. I was in my early 40s, but no, dude, I am telling you, like, or no, I was 39. So yeah, I was like right at cause I was 39 when I moved to Portland. Gosh, that's so crazy to think that I've been up here that long, but I have. I've been making my way up because I started in Portland, Oregon, and now I'm in the Pacific Northwest on the Olympic Peninsula. So I literally like made my way and like moved to different places all the way. And Alder and Bubba and I got to live our dream together. We got to live in a cabin, even though the landlord, like whatever, like, even looking back on it, sometimes like we laugh about certain things, but it was definitely a trade of wills because we loved where we lived. It was magical. But it was like, oh my gosh, like it was kind of dredging, and we lived off the freeway then, but we were on 5 acres up a hill that was so high, it was almost a mountain. How like it becomes a mountain after so many feet and like that kind of thing. It was like, but we were up there. And drink some water if you have some. If not, go get some, hydrate yourself. Also, I just made a lavender oil and I'm going to put it on the heater while I'm talking to you. I'm sitting in front of the propane heater. Or no, not the propane heater. I'd be on fire. The electric heater, the oil heater, little radiator heater. I love it. It's like sitting in front of the radiator. It makes me have my days of living in my vintage apartments curled up around my radiators. So yeah. I've moved 30 plus times in 53 years, and You know, the ongoing joke in my family was that they were like, oh, she's running from the law, you know. And I actually had that in an interview one time. They're like, wow, you've moved around a lot. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I was running from the law. And you just see, you know, they thought it was funny, you know, later, but they just kind of looked at me. I'm like, oh my God, I'm just kidding. I'm like, no, no, no. But I realized like that's what I do. I bring the medicine and I get the medicine. I learn the lessons and then I bring my lessons and I move them forward and onward, upward and onward. So this morning, I know I'm jumping around. So this morning when I woke up to a fucking semi going by and I was like, oh, dude, no fucking way. And I couldn't fall asleep last night. It was so peaceful. But you know, like, you know, when you're so tired and it's so peaceful that you almost just like can't sleep, that has been happening to me lately. And that is exactly what that moment was. It was like I felt so peaceful and I was just enjoying. I started binge watching Project Runway again, but I was watching the All Stars. I never watched the All Stars. And so I was like binge watching those because I was like packed and ready to move. And then like everybody was going through their shit. And I had the 1 month anniversary of Baba's passing. Rest in peace, Baba. And my dad's birthday. Happy birthday, Dad. So it was, I found out through the grapevine that my family was trying to find me to send me something from my mom's estate. And I had already resigned to the fact that I didn't want anything from my parents and that my family can have it. Like, you know, it was okay and whatever. And then my mom and my stepdad literally came to me in a dream. Like, it was so real that like I woke up like sobbing. I woke up and like my pillow was drenched. I mean, I mean, that kind of sobbing where like, how did I sob that long without actually waking up? You know what I mean? Like it was crazy. But when I woke up, like I was like being pulled out. It was almost like I was dreaming and then I was pulled into some portal. Oh gosh, I can feel it in my heart chakra. I can feel it in my heart, but like my whole body. And I literally felt my mom and my stepdad. I could smell them. I could hear them. I could feel them. And it was so beautiful and it was so sensitive. I don't know how to explain it. Like it was so beautifully done and they're both such magical wizards, you know. They've both crossed over and it was really powerful. It's all I can tell you. And they literally were like, "Are you kidding me?" Like they were just like, I'm not going to say all the things they said because if any of my family heard it, they'd probably think I was a jerk or be like, oh yeah, I'm sure they said that too, but they did. Let's just put it this way. I had a different relationship with my mom and my stepdad than my step siblings and my blood and bone siblings. And it was very beautiful and none of us knowing what I really was at that time. I didn't realize like how much my mom and my stepdad and myself were holding space for each other because I ended up moving back in with my parents when I decided to go back to college in my late 30s to be a fashion designer. And I tried to stay and live with them and take the train. I only went like 2 days a week, you know. I was thinking of all these things, like maybe I can get a roommate situation for just like when I'm going to school, but like stay at my mom's, like, but it was so taxing going back and forth on the train because my parents live like 45 minutes outside of the city. Um, and it was, you know, with the train, depending on how many stops and which train I took, it could literally take like an hour and like 20 minutes each way. And I just didn't have it in me. And then like I had to walk because the only train, you know, um, I mean, luckily it was close, but I still had to walk to school after that. So it would take me anywhere between like basically like almost 2 hours each way to get to school. And then I had to participate in school. So when I was working like in pattern making and shit like that. We didn't have lockers. I didn't have anywhere to keep my stuff, you know? I mean, it's like, it was tough. It was tough. So I was like, fuck this. I gotta move. I gotta move downtown. I gotta, you know. So I ended up moving. But I did live with my parents for a year. And it was life changing for all of us. And they had lived in their house. It was a beautiful, like 130-year-old Victorian mansion from like the 1800s, like really fucking beautiful, like hand carved, ornate, like whoever built this house was rich. You know what I mean? Like they were richy rich rich. You wouldn't have things like that. It reminded me of the house from It's a Wonderful Life. It really reminded me of that a lot, but even more beautiful and even more ornate. At least on the inside, because those were sets, you know what I mean? Like their doors were hand carved, and like the wrought iron grates in the ground and the floor. And speaking of ground, their fucking basement was scary as fuck. I was horribly molested by so many ghosts in that place. I mean, looking back on all the places I've lived lately, I've been like realizing like how much like I have been working with the other side since I was born, and just how all of these like places I'm meant to go to, you know, like I'm literally like meant to like go and experience that. See, because when it's quiet, it's divine. You can hear the birds. It's lovely. Um, but yeah, all of these places that I've lived, I've learned something really valuable and important. And so I've always loved my mom and my stepdad's house. They moved in to that house after my mom and I, you know, after like, I was going to say after my mom and I broke up. Kind of felt like that because, you know, my parents got divorced when I was 12 and she was, you know, a single mother. My father was barely around. If I wanted to see him, I had to go to him, especially once I got my license. Forget about it. If he didn't have to pick me up or drop me off or anything like that, forget about it. Forget about it. It was just like, you have a car, you can come see me. Like, you know, talk about narcissists. Interestingly enough, my dad's birthday, who's just passed February 28th, was also that landlord that I had that was like the elder narcissist that didn't, I mean, talk about lessons, right? So like every place I've lived, every experience I've had, and now in my, you know, 53 years on earth in this avatar and through these lessons, I've just learned so much. And I'm so grateful to be able to bring it to you guys and like talk to you about it. And I apologize for my scatteredness, you know, it is the cannabis for sure, but it's also just, I'm in multiple places and portals. A lot of people will never understand what it's like to live like this, or people like, why do you choose to live like this? I'm like, I didn't choose to live like this in like the way that people think I chose to live like this. Was it in my soul contract? Yes. But in choice? No. So with all of this being said, I realized what a great gift it was to live with my parents like that, because I had known my stepdad since I was young. His kids and my brother were on the same sports teams, and he was my dad's best friend. I love how I slipped that Jerry Springer moment in there, but Maury Povich, which is kind of sad, by the way, because Maury Povich and Jerry Springer, I feel like in a way they brought like something interesting into the world, but I feel like they also opened portals into like the ugliness of humanity. It's very interesting. Talk about that path. I mean, it's just very interesting. I digress. But I started to like seriously like look at all of these different experiences and all these different things and like why they're happening. And so when you see things from an outsider's perspective, when you take the emotions out of it, when you hold yourself accountable and say, I did do this, I did plan this, because one of the main things people say is, well, I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be born into this world. But you did. Because it's an honor to be human and it's an honor to live on earth, which is why every time I want to get into politics, because I worked in politics, but every time I want to get into politics, every fucking time, Spirit will show me these amazing legislators that are like congressmen, women, senators, all genders, all, it doesn't matter. And these people who are in government that are like, you don't get to come in here and fucking tell us, like, you're not making America great again or making the world great again. We all see what you're doing, puppets. Like, we all see what you're doing. Like little marionettes, like from the shadow and the darkness of greed. And oh man, it's like, it's very interesting. And I think that like this tiny home movement and living in your home that moves and that kind of thing, like, I feel like I'm yelling because I'm trying to talk over the traffic. Oh my God. I'm wearing the heart colors, by the way, if you noticed. Green and pink. I'm wearing the heart chakra colors. Well, green is our heart chakra, but like pink is like, makes me think of love and romance. But yeah, it's just making me understand and realize the dichotomy of it all. Because there were moments where I woke up and I could sense I was somewhere different. Even though I was in my bed, even though I was in my house, I can feel that the energy is different, Not to mention that so many people died where I live. So many. The interesting thing is when we came to look at the property, I was like, I felt like I walked through a fucking vortex of like pain and suffering. And I was like, and I just felt like this whole, like, it was like, I'm trying to remember that Gulliver's Travels cartoon when I was growing up in the 70s, where they show, where he's passed out on the, he's sleeping like on the ground in like these little tiny, I think they were like pygmies, but I think there's a specific name for them, but they look like, kind of like tribal, where they're like, they're going to take down this beast, right? Because they're not understanding, they're like, who are you? What are you? Kind of thing. But there was just this moment where I totally lost my train of thought. That's so funny. But we'll come back to it. It'll come back to itself. Oh, that's what I was going to say, is the energy. That's why I feel like I'm like the senior right now, where it's like, I don't have to be here. When I was fucking miserable with school, I would just, once I turned 18, when I was a senior, I would just fucking leave. I could legally leave. I can legally like check myself out and say, I don't feel good, I'm going home. And they'd be like, okay. And when I started doing that, I remember like one of my, guidance counselors and the dean like sat me down and they're like, okay, do you understand like that if you keep doing that, you're not going to graduate high school. You can't just keep leaving your classes and not showing up and calling in for yourself. They're like, you can do that legally. They're like, but we're just saying you're not going to graduate. That's not how this works. That doesn't make you an adult. It just, those numbers just officially, yes, you can vote. Yes, you can, whatever, you're 18. They're like, but you are still in high school. And I turned 18 in December. So thank God, because like, you think my family was looking out for me, or you know what I mean? It's like everybody was doing their own thing. So I basically raised myself, and I feel like my mom and my stepdad were courting each other. They were really good friends. She was friends with him. My dad was friends with him. My mom was friends with him, that kind of thing. And then when my parents, my dad started cheating on my mom, and well, that's a whole other thing, but it was really hard for my stepdad because he loved my mom and he thought she was amazing and beautiful. And he was like, dude, you're a fucking idiot. Like, I'm going to take her. Like, if you don't want her, I'm going for her. You know what I mean? Not take her, but. And my mom dated a lot because my mom and my dad were each other's first love. They were their first sex. They got pregnant, and like their parents, obviously it was the 60s. They got married because that's what you did back then. Anyway, if you're wondering, I'm making avocado oil and lavender. I have fresh shucked lavender, organic lavender, from a local farm. I know the curators. They make the most beautiful stuff, and so I crunch up some lavender. Actually, I crunch some up and I put it in whole too, because the whole ones will really like drain for a while. But when you crunch it up, it kind of breaks up it'll go faster. And so I have it on the heat. You can hear I'm putting it on the metal. And then I shake it up and then I put it on there because it's kind of like infusing it. I like to do it with the sun more, but I need it right now. But yeah, so I'm just seeing like these patterns of like love and family and my parents and they were in their mid 30s I was older when I went back to college. I was older than they were when they got divorced. And interesting that my parents got divorced and then my stepdad divorced his wife. And I always felt bad for her because she was really in love with him and he just was not happy with her. And it was just such a sad thing. It was like every time we were all together, and she was the nicest, most beautiful lady, but he just wasn't in love with her. He was in love with my mom. And I think he was in love with my mom for a really long time. And I think she knew it. I think my dad knew it. My mom knew it. You know what I mean? Like we all kind of like felt that, but he was very respectful and she was respectful. And there was this one night where something major went down, and it's kind of weird because and it's not weird. I started to notice as I got older, and definitely now looking back, like now I can look back at 50 years and be like, whoa, shit, like look at all these things I've been a part of, you know? I'm mostly looking forward, but I'm looking back too sometimes, and I'm just like, holy shit, like, oh yeah, and that molded me that way, and that, you know what I mean? But something really horrible went down between my parents, like really bad. Like, you know, they were very physical. He was an alcoholic, and it just got really bad. And my parents got into a fight in front of the town. And like, we were really well known. Our family, our extended family were like some of the founders of the town I grew up in. You know, it was just like one of those fucking like made for TV movies of the week. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it would be I mean, I guess it could be a good blockbuster. Maybe I could make it into one. But it was just, but sad too, because he tried to help my mom out of the situation because my dad had like humiliated her in front of like all these people. And, you know, a lot of times when someone's cheating and they get called out on it, then especially a narcissist, they don't want to be called out. And so when my mom was like, I'm leaving you, and she like called him out and was like, you know, whatever, and she had threatened forever, but like this time she was like, no, I'm like, she's like got a lawyer and filed and everything. And it was like my parents left the house all beautiful and dressed up. It was like this banquet for my brother and the football team and everything, and like, you know, they were like state champions or something. I don't remember the whole thing, but like it was like something big. It was like, or maybe it was like end of the season, but whatever it was. I just remember because I was like 11 or 12 at the time, but it was just like a really big event, and they left one way, and like next thing I know, like a car pulls up, and it was my stepdad's car, and it was just there, and nobody got out of the car. And I was like, okay. And I remember being like, what's going on? And I don't even remember if I went out there or what happened. But next thing I know, my dad comes up drunk as a motherfucker in his car. I guess it wants to be off the heat for a minute. And got out, and I had to physically witness my father beat the living shit out of my stepdad, where we were all screaming like the police came. It was embarrassing. Like our whole neighborhood, it was like, and it wasn't the first time the cops came to our house. It was one of the last times the cops came to our house. The sad thing is, because my dad was so close to everybody, he never went to jail. Nothing bad ever happened to my dad, which is why he got away with it. The worst that would happen is they would like make him sleep it off in jail, but he like never was like charged or convicted or anything like that. He was a volunteer fireman. They all looked out for each other, that kind of thing, you know. So it was a good old boy mentality. It was the 60s, the 70s, and the early 80s. It was a different time. So yeah, although I guess that's what they want to make America great again, right? Where I'll take care of you. I've got money. I could pay you off, you know, blah, blah, blah. Instead of somebody saying like, no, this man obviously needs help. You know, he keeps beating up his wife. He's a drunk, you know. Even my dad later on was like, he had said to me like in so many words, like, I wish somebody had made me stop. Or like, you know, I mean, he understood through AA and stuff that like nobody can make him stop, but you know. So looking at all of these stories and all of these experiences that have created me, It's like even my childhood, I wasn't that kid that get to grow up in the same house. You know, that is a luxury now that I realize more and more, you know, and I even had it better than some kids who were going from foster home to foster home and being molested or tortured or, you know, mentally abused or all of the above, or, you know what I mean? So there's so much that's happening on the planet right now, and the divine masculine has like lost its shit. I watched it over the weekend. I ended up having arguments with my landlord and Alder, and that's the first argument I had with my landlord since I mean, even at one point I said to him, I'm like, I've known you a year. I said, I've known you almost a year now, because we moved to that other property in the 4-4 portal. Isn't that crazy? And now my first day here is the 3-3 portal. But I almost feel like it's like 4, 3, 2. You know what I mean? Like we're almost there. We're almost there. I don't know. I hope that's true. But you know, so all these experiences with my family, it's like, you know, then my parents shortly divorced after that. My mom and I went from apartment to apartment like gypsies. The first house that I lived in, I lived there till I was 5. Then the house that we were in when they got in that fight, I lived there from the time I was 5 until I was 12. So that's the longest I'd ever lived anywhere, you know, and that would stay that way. I've never lived anywhere longer than 7 years. Not one place. I may have lived in an area, but I've never stayed in one dwelling or like one. And yeah, I started to look at all of this and the patterns of it and what's going on. And instead of going into the third dimensional, like, you know, what's happening? You know, why is this happening to me? Why, Spirit? Why hast thou forsaken me? Why would you bring me to this Motel 6? You know what I mean? Why am I dealing with this? But I started to remember that when I was working with one of my shamans, actually, this was when I was working with this couple. They were both very powerful healers. But I was working with my shaman at the time, and she said, you're going to be tested and things are going to come up and you're going to, and I said, how will I know? And she's like, trust me, you'll know. And over the years, I have had moments where I just start laughing. So I'm like, oh, okay, haha. You know, like Spirit's got a good sense of humor. They really do. They really do. But it doesn't feel that way when it's happening, does it? It doesn't fucking feel funny. It's not funny when it's happening. It's not funny when it's like tragic and horrible. And you know what I mean? That's not funny. That's not funny at all. Drink some water. Is this because I'm sitting in front of this heater? I need to move it. And just sit like this. It just felt so good because it's beautiful, like I said, but also it's like we're in an inlet, and the way that like our RV is parked, there's like nothing to like block whatever, you know what I mean? Like, so any energy that's coming from, you know, the water, the salt water and the mountains is like going like right under our RV. You know what I mean? Like it is not going to be warm. It is not going to be warm. But we're at the end of winter, so it's fine. I mean, I've been looking at the weather and I was like, oh, it's not going to be nice when it's, you know, such and such degrees, but I'll deal with it. But I started to recognize like these patterns that were happening with my mom and my stepdad and my dad. And just like, even though they abandoned me in a lot of ways, it strengthened me. I had to learn to fend for myself, and but also it was very destructive because I was so young. I had a lot of families who took care of me, like literally took care of me. There were some families where I like lived with them for a year instead of like moving in with back in with my parents or whatever. Like I lived with like my best friend's parents for a year so I can get my shit together. And I remember one time one of her parents said to me, like, because I was like, I feel embarrassed. I feel embarrassed because they caught me crying. And I was like, I'm fine, I'm okay. And they're like, no, what's wrong? And I was just like, I'm just embarrassed. I'm like, that I have to do this, that I can't take care of myself. And she just sat on the bed, my friend's mom. She was this most loving, sweet woman. And she just sat on the bed and she was like,
do you even know? She's like, you've been in survival mode for so long. She's like, do you even know how wrong your parents did you? Like, do you even know? Like, she's like, do you recognize? Like, she's like, you know, she was trying to be gentle because her parents were still married and they were like, they weren't the Brady Bunch. They had their skeletons, which I found out after living there and stuff, but which was cool too in a weird way because I always idolized them and put them on a pedestal. And then when I found out all these like deep, dark secrets about their family, I was like, oh shit. But at the same time, I was like, that's enlightening. And it actually made me feel better because I always thought of them as like being perfect. And I remember my mom saying one time, like, you know, they're not perfect either. I'm sure that they have things that you don't know about. And I'm like, they are perfect. She's like, just because they have money and they look perfect from the outside doesn't mean they're perfect. She was right. My mom always had really good intuition like that. But my parents, I say my parents because my stepdad was way more of a father to me than my biological father was for many, many years of my life, most of my life, actually. And since I'd known him since I was like 7, 8 years old, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, for sure. So, we were living in an apartment, he was living in an apartment, and then when they finally bought a house, I had moved out on my own by that point. And I loved their house. I'm like, why couldn't you have lived here when I was, when I was a kid? I'm like, well, why couldn't you guys have pulled your shit together? But, they were young and whatever. Looking back on it, but their house was dreamy. It was so, so, so dreamy. It was so magical. It had so many beautiful things, but they put a lot of time and energy, a lot of remodeling, a lot of changes. And like if you went and like if I gave you the address and you went and looked at it, you'd be like, oh my gosh, I didn't look like that. They did that, but it took them years to make it look like that. But it's special. It's a special house. So living with them older in a house like my real parents in a vintage house, which I love vintage, I was like, I think I could do this. It was peaceful. It was beautiful. It was in a town of 3,000 people. But guess what? Yeah, train tracks. Train. Now, the only difference is it had two different tracks. And oh no, it didn't come down that far. That's right. I was going to say because you had your commuter train, but no, it didn't come down that far. That's right. That's right. No, by them it was just the slow. So they had like what do they call them? The slow trains or whatever. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh right. That's right. Okay. So no, there was Amtrak. That's what it was. It was an Amtrak. There were Amtrak trains because I was like, no, I remember seeing people on it before. So there was like one was like Amtrak that goes like across like, states and stuff, and one was like, like the slow moving trains. But there were no stops in their town. So it was just like at first I hated it because it would like drove me crazy. But then after and the funny thing is I lived in cities most of my life, like most of my adult life. Chicago and LA. So it was very interesting to kind of have this experience of these trains because I'd, been by the L and like things like that, but like not like that. But after a while, I started to like it. And on a hot summer night when like all the windows were open and they didn't have central air, because it was an old home, there were moments where you'd hear the train. It was like choo 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 choo. It was kind of nice. Like it was like whatever. But I found that like almost everywhere I lived, there was something that was like moving or there was a lot of energy. I grew up like after I moved out of my father's house because my dad kept the house and we moved out. I lived in apartments, and then I lived in apartments all of my life. Um, I lived in a few. Well, no, that's not true. Most of my life, I lived in a few. I lived in a townhome, but it felt like my house because the only thing connecting us was a garage. But most of the places that I've lived, I've been on a busy road or a train track or an L track or, like, the if you're familiar with when you watch like movies like Chicago, like the elevated trains, that's how they call it, the elevated. So the subway, like that kind of energy, like the fast moving trains or the like tick, 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 like that. But this, I I likened it to when Alder and I were working on Big Camper, and his mom was like, "Oh, you can work on it here." We never planned to live with his mom. It was supposed to be a temporary thing because we got Big Camper and we were going to gut it and do the tiny home experience. She's like, "Oh, you can live in my house. You can live in the back bedroom, this and that, blah, blah, blah." And I asked her if we should go over there and clean it. She was a hoarder. And Alder was like, "I'm never going to be able to live in here." And I was like, "Okay, well, we don't have to." And he's like, "I'll live in my truck." I'm like, "Okay." Long story short, we could not live in her house. It was inhabitable. Even though she tried to clean the back bedroom for us and do all these things, it was not going to happen. So we realized early on that like the only way we were going to be able to live in Big Camper was for us to at least live somewhere else while we got it. And since we had already moved to his mom's and we didn't really have a choice, we ended up we had saved, I don't know, like $700 or $800 was like the beginning of our savings, because she was like, "You can stay here, until you figure out where you're going to go or what you're going to do." And we weren't sure if we wanted to stay where we were or we were going to move, but we had like, a nice little chunk of change. And we ended up spending almost all of it at a Motel 6. And because of where his mom lived, the closest place, it was like we figured everything out, like money wise. And it actually was cheaper all the way around, gas, like lodging, everything. It was cheaper for us to stay like almost a half an hour away from his mom, which was annoying because we had to do that every day while we were working on Big Camper. And then we basically started running out of money, and we were gutting as quick. We started to see like what we had to do. So we're like, well, let's gut this, let's gut that. So we like, ripped out the carpets and we tore it down to like a shell. We were pleasantly surprised when we ripped the floor out that it was like a hardwood floor in an apartment, because it was from the 70s and it was made very, very well. It was a Ford. It was a roll along. It was like a special edition that they had done at the time. It was like the kind of like luxury RV at the time, and our model, everything now, because this one's not like that. But this one's awesome. We drove in this yesterday, and I actually was like, "This is really nice." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "This is my third time driving," and he goes, "It's okay on the freeway." He's like, because we had to go through like mountains and stuff to get here, and he's like, "But I kept telling him like, you're doing a really good job." I'm like, "You're doing a really good job." It was so weird to move without Bubba. It was so weird. I cried all weekend. That's what I was gonna say earlier. Is like I was more exhausted than the boys because I started packing and getting this place together. We were supposed to move Saturday morning. We ended up not moving till like 3 o'clock Sunday afternoon. So I just had to sit around and wait for everybody. It's like whatever. Well, I mean, I kept working, but I'm saying like, it's not like I was, things were packed away. I'm like, I'm not going to be doing readings or whatever. I did go through stuff, and I mean, it gave me time to go through things, so it was good. I mean, that's what I mean is like, no time has been lost. It's just been a fucking another learning experience, another intense learning experience that I can bring back to you guys. And I do love the tiny home living. I do. I mean, I realized it, especially last night, because when the traffic was so fucking harsh, I had a moment where I was like, what did I do? I'm like, what did I do? Why am I still with him? Why is this happening? I want to leave. I want to leave. Abort, abort, abort. Warning, Will Robinson. Like everything was going off in my head. Oh, I just got the chills. And so the difficult part of this process, and the overall reason why I wanted to tell you guys this, is that we are meant to embrace the journey. It's not about the destination, and it's not about the outcome. It's about the lessons, and the world is what it is. And we chose to be here at this time. We chose to live here at this time. So because that just went by, I have to jump around the story again and say, so when it finally got quiet last night, I was enjoying it. But then this morning, I woke up and I was like, oh, that kind of thing where you're like, you're in a peaceful sleep. I was like, oh, I was in a peaceful sleep. And then all of a sudden it was like the first fucking main, like semi or whatever it was that went by, really powerful truck. I was like, oh my God. I was like, oh my God. Because even if I had ear things, you know what I mean, and didn't hear it, I could feel it. I can feel it. I literally can feel it. It's only like 100 feet away from my door, like from my house, literally. So every semi that goes by, we're sharing the same ground. I was like, oh my God. And again, even if we stabilized this, like put it up on boards and all that, I would still feel it. Not to mention that because of like where we are, we're kind of like the way the property is, it kind of like, and the location of where we have the RV to have like the best view and where it makes sense. And we have the like most privacy that we can kind of have being, on the road. I mean, there's other like buildings and structures. We're like behind, a building, but I'm saying like, it's like having an acre of land. You're going to feel if someone's mowing the lawn and you're like outside and they're on a big tractor mower, you're going to feel the vibration under your feet. So I woke up and I was like, oh my God. And because I know the last time I looked at the clock, it was not quite 2 a.m. And the way that the lighting was, I could tell what time it was. And I like looked at my phone and I was like, yeah, I've had about 5 hours of sleep. So, and the time is changing this coming Sunday. I don't know when I'll ever show this, if I'll ever show this. So, but daylight savings time is, I'm glad, right? But all I could think was, can you imagine this in the summer? No. So I said to Spirit, what the fucking fuck? This is beautiful. Like, I'll show you, like I said, look in not the community section, what is it? Look in the posts and you'll see pictures. I'll post a few pictures of the place, of the sunset anyway, last night. But no matter how pretty that is, or if I went out to the edge of the road and looked and saw the salt water, like as beautiful as it is, no, it's not worth my peace and sanity. I was like, so that shaman that I worked with that said, you will get signs from Spirit and you will know. When your spiritual growth is taking place, when you're the most angry, when you're crying, when you want to leave, when you want to step out, when you want to, just chuck it all. She's like, those are the moments that you need to look for the lesson and the growth in the lesson. Because it's easy for me to blame Alder and our past and my parents and their relationships, and you know what I mean, like it's easy for me to blame all of these things and all of these whatever and say, whatever. Or I can say self-admittedly, this is who I have grown into. Because on one of my spiritual journeys, this couple that I was telling you about earlier, this spiritual couple, they worked with singing bowls. They were very powerful. They worked in tandem. One was a massage therapist and one was a singing bowl master. And while the one was like working on my body, the other one was like, had these singing bowls all around me. It was the coolest thing. I've never done anything like it since. And well, no, I've done one other thing that was similar to that, but like never journeyed the way I did with them, like where I literally like raised out of my body and was like looking at my body, but knew like my body was safe and they were like healing me and like working on that. And like I went into the outer realms to work with the ancestors, and that was the first time where the ancestors brought me to this really these magical mountains, this magical place. And I was like in the mountains, but like could still see like the peaks, and there was like this river and these trees, and there was And now, and the interesting thing is, at the time, I had never been to this place, but that's the place where Alder and I ended up getting married. And that is the place where we also laid Bubba to rest. But in my journeying, I had never been there. And it was this, I didn't realize at the time like that what was happening. But the ancestors met me around the fire. When I first went into the journey, when I was, on this what do they call it? Meditation or whatever, like I was astral traveling. I was sitting by myself and it was nighttime. And I remember seeing the stars and the river was going by and I was in front of the fire and the trees were big and magical and elder trees. And it was just a really magical place. But I remember feeling scared because I was by myself. And I remember thinking, like, why am I here at nighttime by myself? And one by one, if you've ever seen the Twilight movies, this is the best visual I can give you because that is exactly how it kind of felt. Do you remember when, I don't remember which one it was, maybe the last movie or the second to the last movie, where they know that they're in trouble with the Valtori, is that their name? I think that was the name of it. The vampire, kind of like the Vatican. But it was the vampire Vatican. They were like coming for them and they end up like calling out all of their people, and one by one all the vampires from all over the world show up, and they're from like different parts of the world, different cultures, like the indigenous ones show up. That's exactly how it was. It was so fucking cool. It was like one by one all these ancestors just started to show up, and I was like, oh, but I knew them, and I felt, and I was like, oh my gosh. And it was just like, and one by one they like came by and either like touched me or just like looked and like bowed to me and like sat across, like, but we were all around this, and it was a big fucking fire. And there must have been 12, 13 of them or more. I don't know. It was really powerful. But they were like that. Like they came, like some came by themselves. Some came in like two. Some came with like a clan of like, it was very interesting. And it was almost like every family that I've ever had or I've ever lived. It was so wild. And I just remember it went from that moment where we were talking without talking. And they were telling me all these things and showing me all these things. And then this very like Buddhist monk, like ancestor, like grabbed my arm or my hand or something, and they took me out of this peaceful, beautiful place with them in the mountains and the fire, and we were just like having this great time together. And they put me in a New York subway at 5:00 on a Friday. And I was angry and I was upset, and I was like, why would you bring me here? Why would you bring me here? I'm like, this is awful. And he's like, we were sitting on a bench, but it was like, it was so real. All of it was so fucking real to me, you guys. Like, it was so real. And it was almost like our bench was there, but like people were like, they weren't walking through us, but they were definitely walking around us and going around, like, but weren't acknowledging that we were there. It was so wild. I'm gonna let that go. And they said, now close your eyes and meditate. And I was like, what? Like, what do you mean? I'm like, I can't fucking meditate in here. I'm like, this is insane. I'm like, this is insane. I'm like, this is not going to happen. I'm like, it's not going to happen. Since that time, and since that last moment, the last thing they said to me was, when you can master this, when you can find peace and comfort and grounding energy in this energy, they're like, then you will become the master. And I was like, what? So this morning when I woke up, I thought about all of these different things that have happened to me. And how, even down to like getting the papers for my parents' estate on Thursday. Friday was my dad's birthday. He would have been 75. My mom made it to 75. She's the only one out of my parents, step and my blood and bone, that made it to 75. And I remember my mom saying to me when I was living with her, she's, she was always like, next moment's not promised to us, blah, 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 blah. That was always her thing. And I remember her saying, isn't this so weird? Like how we kind of started together, meaning like she went from her parents' house to living with my dad. And then I was born, third in line, and then grew up with my mom in one house. Then they moved to another house, and then we were all there together for 7 years. And then after that, I moved apartments with my mom. Like I moved house with my mom like 3 times after that. And then when I was 19, we got in a fight and she kicked me out. And I had nowhere to go, and I had to like really take care of myself. And nobody would give me money. My dad had the money. He said that it would make me stronger if I did things on my own. It was time for me to, I was 19 now. I could take care of myself. And so I went and got a loan and did everything myself. I had a American Express card when I was 19 years old because I was working downtown in Chicago. I was making really good money. But my mom came to me and she was showing me like, even that, like she had to do that to get me to stand on my own, to be strong. And that was that shaman was showing me, that is that all these lifetimes and all these moves and all these situations, a lot of times moves happened not really by choice. I was always searching for home. I was always searching for a place to feel comfortable, to feel safe, to feel loved. And I never really felt that way anywhere. And then as I started, working with spirit and shamans and teachers and spiritual guidance counselors and all of that, I started to recognize and understand who I am and my gifts. And being a telepathic medium and an empath, I mean, it's just, and there's just labels. I mean, basically it's just like, nobody can lie to me, even though they're lying to my, like, I've been having people lie to my face my whole life and knowing they're lying to my face, except for I used to call people out. Now I just, I don't really call people out. Drink some water. Like I used to, unless it's like someone who's really close to me or they're paying me to, you know what I mean? Like in a reading where I'm like, well, do you want to hear what your spirit guides have to say? Like, you don't have to. Are you ready for this? Do you want to hear these things? I ask that at the beginning of all my sessions, because the real medicine, the real hard shit, the real tough changes are the ones that mold us into the warriors that we came here to be. And if you found yourself here and you're watching this and you've gotten this far, then you recognize something in your story that's similar to mine, in terms of, maybe not identifying with this or that, or understanding this or that, or recognizing now, like, it's okay to have limitations. It doesn't make you weak because you can't break through a ceiling. Not everybody's meant to break through every ceiling. So this morning when I was in the why health thou forsaken me kind of thing, they're like, you woke up in your bed in your house. It's a layover. I'm like, you said that about the last place and we were there for almost a year. And they're like, it was a layover though, because it was a place for me to mourn the death of my mother and, be with Bubba through her last months. Alder's been on his, journey, searching for himself, trying to work through his stuff. I've been working on my stuff. And I had said to him last year when we decided to keep this and keep moving forward with the remodel, I said, I can take it or leave it. I said, it doesn't mean anything to me. But this morning, I was so grateful because I thought to myself, number one, I don't have to stay here forever. And number two, isn't it interesting that the next phase of our remodel that we want to do requires like power tools and space and a place where we can do it, where, a lot of places that we've looked at to go and, rent space to live, it'll say because people have learned through this tiny home, explosion over the last, decade plus now. It's probably been, I mean, it's been going on for years. People have been gypsies and living, a certain way. I actually have a poem that I recorded some years ago or some time ago. I don't know if they'll ever have me post it, but it's called Primal Gypsy, because that's how I feel. Maybe I'll post it on Lula's Labyrinth. But there's something about, these experiences that I've had. And then the irony of it all is I've been seeking home and seeking a relationship with, someone who is admittedly telling me, I'm not that person for you. You want that. I'm never going to be that. I'm never going to be that. And I'm like, that's interesting, because you showed me that person this time, you showed me that person that time. So it's like, no, so you're choosing that. Huge difference. So I don't know what's going to happen with Alder and I. I mean, I have begged Spirit to let me go solo. I'm like, I literally am at the point where I'm like, I can pack a fucking bag. You know what I mean? Like, I can pack a bag right now and just go tour the world. I'm like, honestly, I'm like, Bubba's gone now. I mourn her every day. I cry every day. I don't think there's been a day since she's passed that I haven't cried. But she's with me, and I know that she'll be with me no matter where I go. But every time I try to break away from Alder, it's like I get pulled back, and not in the shadow respect. You know what I'm saying? It's like more in the, like, no, ooh, when I looked up, it was 111, because, our thing is 11/11. That's when we got married. It's 11/11, 11/11/2020. Isn't that interesting? We planned that, though. We really planned that. But I started to look at all of these different things and all of these different, and just so much has been going on that I feel like this really is a layover. But what a blessing. Because in that little blurb, a lot of people say, you cannot do construction here. You cannot, because a lot of people will rent the space and then they do construction. And, even if you clean it up, it's hard to like make it immaculate. We're like, where we are on our landlord's other property, he's literally he's fixing this fence and working on this project, like right outside of, the spot that we're in. In fact, he just texted me to see, like, to let me know he's coming. So I'm like, can you just text me when you're coming? And I was like, between him working on power tools and that, I'm like, I feel like I'll go cuckoo, but I feel like that's the Buddha. That was that Buddha energy, that monk that was like, you need to be able to be Zen even when it's not. And so I realized, I think Spirit's doing this for me and Alder on purpose, so that we'll go camping, because we are so happy together when we're in nature. We're like different people. And I feel like this is a place where we're meant to like work on this and work on the property, because that's our trade. So I feel like spring is like that. And then I feel like we're going to end up going somewhere else. But in the meantime, I feel like we're meant to like go take little camping trips and get back into nature. And I feel like we'll either reconnect that way, because that's how we fell in love. And like, and because the day that Bubba died, we were the most like us that we've been in so long, where I just had a moment where I just like, I felt hope again. I actually went home that night and wrote in my journal how much hope I had for me and Alder, because I was like, we were there. We're still us. We're still there. He's still there. And sure enough, this morning when the traffic happened and all that happened, I realized, yeah. And if not, then we can walk away knowing, because I don't think he could handle this either. Because I said to him yesterday, I go, I don't know what's going to happen between us. I said, but when the fire pit was going in the mountains, I go, if you don't hear the traffic, I go, look at how magical this is. He's like, yeah. I go, it's pretty fucking magical. But he's sensitive to that stuff too. I don't think either one of us are meant to stay here. I think it's a layover. So live in the layover. Sometimes we need to be in the layover, and it may feel like a curse, but it's a blessing. You just can't see the blessing sometimes. You can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing, But the story with my mom and my stepdad was that I got to live in that cool place with them. I got to have them as parents, and I got to know them. and we were very close. And there were moments where we had intimate conversations about their death. And I'm not going to go into too many details, but when they came to me, they're like, you need to take care of this now. I literally woke up that morning. I researched Arkansas, their names, and and it came up. It came up their estate, and I was like, because I'm like, it's public record. They went through lawyers, right? So because I had found out that people were trying to find me, and I was like, I don't know what for, but so long story short, I called the lawyer and she sent me the paperwork, and it arrived like 2 days before we moved. And I had to, because my parents were like, we want you to have this. This is, you put up with a lot. You sacrificed your childhood. They're like, basically they were like, out of all of our children, like, we really want you to have this. Please, please, please. And Spirit was like, it's part of your path. It's part of your journey. So I'm like, I'm not gonna, whatever it is, I don't care if it's $20. I'm supposed to, whatever it is, I'm supposed to be a part of it. So I'll leave that for what it is and take it for what it is. And I feel like right now, Alder and I, like, we've got all the supplies. We bought them all last year, but we never did things. And now with our landlord being here, and like, when we pulled in and I saw, I'm like, all this stuff wasn't here. Because I was like, I need a gate of some kind or something. I'm like, I don't like that people can just like, come in here. He's like, well, I started building a gate and blah, blah, blah. So he's building a gate, and he was doing it anyway. So he's going to be working on that. And then we're going to be working on this. And so either we're going to keep this and move it somewhere else, or one of us is going to take it, or we're going to sell it and be the gypsies that we're meant to be. I don't know. But all I know is that Spirit was like, calm, get centered, get grounded. It's going to be a busy few months. It's going to be a busy time. They're like, by the end of this year, they're like, everything will make sense. So I've got another hard-working year, and I feel like you guys do too. It's the year of the snake, so it's time to rebirth and shed the skin and let go of that which no longer serves us, but also take the lessons and listen to our ancestors when they're talking to us, so that we can figure out and put the puzzle pieces together and go on this spiritual journey individually and, with all the people that are in our lives, so that we can sort out these issues, so that we can go to the root of like what's keeping us from our destiny, or keeping us from, I was like, I kept getting these things for piano. I'm like, are you kidding? I'm like, I can't do art and make music here. I'm like, that'll make me crazy. And then I thought, I need to get headphones. Once I feel like this is that kind of place where if I just adjust and tweak a little bit, I can deal. I mean, I can't change the, when the fucking trucks go by, but c'est la vie, it's not forever. But I can take my ass into the fucking mountains and sleep far, far off grid. And you know what I mean? And that's what I'm going to have to do. Anyway, I got to check back in with him. This has gone really long. I love you guys so much. Thank you for hanging in there and listening and being a part of this journey with me. And I'll keep you posted as things go. Until next time, I love you so much. Love yourself and love each other. I'll see you. Love you. Bye.